Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Doesn't matter what time of day or night it is, I'm always just as grateful that you have stopped by my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Reverend Paul J. Bern, and I am the online pastor of the online church known as the Social Gospel Worship and Learning Center of Atlanta, Georgia. This is not a brick and mortar church. This is not a church where religion is taught. This is not a church where denominational teachings are taught. We only teach Jesus Christ crucified, died, and resurrected. It's the central part of the message, the most important part of the message, and so that's what I stick to. You too can have salvation in Christ if you don't have it already. Just pray the sinner's prayer. Lord, I'm a sinner. I don't want to be one anymore. Please mold me and shape me into the person you want me to be. And I place my complete faith in you. In Jesus' name, amen. That little prayer right there will get you started off on the right foot. It's not all there is, but it's a good start. Now, for today's message, for Veterans Day of 2022, I'm actually a couple of days past that now, as I finally had the time to record this. But for Veterans Day, I decided to write about something that I write about every chance I get, and that topic is the immorality of waging war. With the population of the planet continuing to rise and just past the 8 billion mark, we are facing with the stark choice of wanting to live together in peace and harmony or to face mutual destruction, annihilation, really. The horrors of the modern battlefield are the result of ever more powerful and formidable weapons. The tremendous firepower of modern military weaponry is so deadly and so accurate that the results of these attacks can be etched into the minds and psyches of the war's veterans, and particularly of the innocent civilians, forever. It never goes away. Part of the result of this is we now have too many homeless veterans. Far too many. This is an injustice and it must be stopped. These brave men and women were oftentimes exposed to chemical weapons that have left them permanently damaged. It's an unfortunate and troubling fact that 1 out of 5 returning veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars came home mentally or physically disabled by their exposure to chemical weapons and to depleted uranium ammunition. According to channel4.com, an article from that publication back from 2015 stated then that there was an estimated 48,000 Iraqi and Afghanistan veterans that were homeless in 2013, according to figures from the United States Department of Veterans Affairs. I understand last year's number was over 60,000. And all because of lies about weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. Because what America's military was really after was the oil. We're still there pumping that oil. We're still there. But as far as all the psychological damage is concerned, war psychosis is real. So much so that I have found that I'm going to point out 4 examples from the last 10 years of what can and does go wrong when these people come home from the battlefront. Consider the case of John Allen Muhammad, formerly John Allen Williams. In her memoir, Scared Silent, Mildred Muhammad, the latter of his two ex-wives, writes that her husband went to the 1991 Gulf War a happy and focused and intelligent man who returned from home depressed, totally confused, and violent, making her fear for her life. In their briefs, Muhammad's appeals lawyers stressed that his severe mental illness never came up at the trial, where he was allowed to represent himself despite obvious mental incompetence. For example, to the very end, he maintained his innocence, claiming that at the time of the killing spree, he was in Germany for dental work. In seeking clemency and a stay of execution, Muhammad's lawyers presented psychiatric reports diagnosing schizophrenia and brain scans documenting profound malfunctions consistent with psychotic disease. Neither the U.S. Supreme Court nor Virginia Governor Tim Kaine were impressed, unfortunately. According to Governor Kaine, and I'm quoting him here, crimes that are this horrible you just can't understand. And one day before Veterans Day, John Allen Muhammad was executed by lethal injection. Next subtitle, but wait, there's more. In 2002, another Gulf War veteran, Lewis Jones Jr., was executed for the 1995 rape and murder of a young female soldier, Private Tracy Joy McBride. Like Sergeant Muhammad, Sergeant Jones was an exemplary soldier decorated in the war, but also like Muhammad, he returned from Desert Storm depressed, disoriented, and increasingly antisocial and bizarre. Like Muhammad, his defense was inadequate, but his appeals lawyers displayed MRIs and other scans of his abnormal brain, arguing that it was evidence of the brain damage from toxins he and other veterans with Gulf War disease were exposed to when they were in country. Supporting the petition for clemency was the written testimony of Dr. Haley that, and I quote, there is now a compelling involuntary link between Mr. Jones's neurotoxic war injury and his inexplicable crime. Like Muhammad, Jones was stationed at Camisaya during the demolition, which poisoned thousands of troops and then thousands more as sarin plumes traveled far and wide. A fact that the government hid for close to a decade. And John Muhammad worked at the same place, the same dump. Killing, even in war, can be just as traumatic for the veterans as it is for the civilians. Case in point, there's the case of Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber. Impossible to forget this guy. We have no scans of his brain, but we have ample reports of his mental state before and after Desert Storm, and evidence that the war had changed him profoundly. In their biography, American Terrorist, Lou Michael and Dan Herbeck, pardon me, paint a vivid picture of McVeigh's days in the ground war. The enthusiastic young marksman, at first, happily followed orders and shot an Iraqi soldier manning a machine gun from over a mile away. When the bloody mist replaced the soldier's head and his viewfinder, McVeigh was disturbed and discharged the rest of his rounds into the desert sand. Later, after Saddam had agreed to a UN and Soviet brokered ceasefire, McVeigh was further shocked and shaken by orders to kill defeated Iraqi soldiers traveling home on the highway from Kuwait to Iraq, which has since come to be known as the Highway of Death for the thousands that the U.S. forces corralled and massacred together on the night of February the 26th, 1991. Next subtitle, The Damage That War Does to the Soldier. Part B, I guess you could say. The last paragraph being A. He watched the road in horror. Timothy McVeigh watched the road in horror, as dogs chewed on human limbs and as human bodies without arms or legs tried to crawl away. In his famous 60 Minutes interview 10 years later, McVeigh would tell the late Ed Bradley that the killing changed him. He said he found himself thinking, I'm in this person's country. This is McVeigh talking to Ed Bradley now. What right did I have to come over to his country and kill him? How did he ever transgress against me? McVeigh went over there thinking not only is Saddam evil, all Iraqis are evil. But quickly it was an entirely different ballgame. Face to face, he said, you realize they're just people like you. McVeigh told Bradley that the government modeled brutal violence in the 1998 prison essay. He objected to the United States' continuing campaign against Iraq. It was the U.S. that had set the standard for stockpiling the use of weapons of mass destruction. Next subtitle, paragraph. Timothy McVeigh's damaged brain was actually an epidemic. An epidemic of psychosis. Yes, there is such a thing. It's happening every day. McVeigh's experience in the Gulf War surely altered his thinking, but did it also alter his brain? What toxins might have entered his body on the highway where U.S. forces had just dropped cluster bombs and 500-pound bombs of napalm and depleted uranium, incinerating thousands of vehicles and the people inside them? He told Ed Bradley that when he came back, something didn't feel right to me, but I couldn't say what it was. Psychological trauma alone, neuroscientists now tell us, affects not only psyches but brains. Sophisticated neuroimaging shows the brains of those who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder to be abnormal in areas of regulating memory retrieval and inhibition, as well as fearfulness and focus and emotionalism and liability. The hippocampus of the human brain of Alzheimer's sufferers are also shrunken just like this, and the amygdala of bipolar sufferers has enhanced activation similar to those with PTSD. Unlike McVeigh, Muhammad, or Jones, this is another example of war damage. Excuse me for a moment. Let me get that. Thank you. Major Nidal Hassan was not exposed to war's toxins, nor to its traumas firsthand. Day after day, though, soldiers returning from Iraq or Afghanistan or on their way back relived before him attacks and atrocities that they had inflicted, suffered, and or witnessed, altering his views and his mind. In the beginning of his army training and service, by all accounts, Nidal Hassan was proud to serve his country. His examination of the internal conflict within Muslim GIs, asked to kill other Muslims, prohibited in the Quran, starting out as an academic project to enhance the Army's understanding and management of the dilemma. Next subheading, now we can see why. Why Hassan's exposure to mentally disturb soldiers' memories, fears, and guilt increased. So evidently did his own internal strife, and in all likelihood, the secondary PTSD common to family members, friends, and professionals in close contact with the victims, with the witnesses, and with the perpetrators of the catastrophes. But Major Hassan's religion was only one of the several aspects of his being shattered by the stories he was charged with hearing. The troubled GI who opened fire on fellow soldiers at a counseling center in Fort Liberty back in 2011 was not a Muslim, although some right-wing blogs initially suggested that he was. In truth, the violence soldiers and veterans inflict against other Americans is not unfathomable at all, for reasons that I've already stated. Modern wars cause modern injuries. 21st century wars cause 21st century injuries. The firepower expended on Iraq in the Six-Day War from 2003 to 2009 was greater than that used in all the wars in history combined. The savage murder of civilians, though not on the radar of most producers and consumers of American media, smolders in the minds of many troops and veterans of all backgrounds serving in all three recent wars in the region. Troops that were on U.S. bases in Afghanistan and in Iraq, like the local civilians, suffered from the fumes from open burn pits, the depth of city blocks, and the length of small towns. Blast injuries from IEDs continue to damage the interiors of bodies and brains, often with no external breakage or bleeding, causing a new kind of brain injury not seen before in the chronicles of war. Chemical fumes, powders, and liquids from military industrial facilities bombed in both Operation Desert Storm and Operation Iraqi Freedom continue to contaminate the earth, the water, and the air. It's all still over there. And we did that. It's on us. Forgive us all, Lord. Forgive us all. In closing, war damage remains an ongoing problem. For the coming decades, the consequences of the U.S. invasions will be for Iraqis and Afghans to suffer disease and deprivation, and invading and occupying troops will carry the war back home as soldiers always do, but with their brains and their bodies and their minds shattered as never before. Who will identify and prosecute those who bear the greatest responsibility for these heinous mass murders? Brutal murders by American veterans and troops of fellow soldiers and citizens were surely not the outcomes planned by our leaders, but by now they are forever linked to violent and highly unstable behavior that has resulted in mass casualties here at home. America has a moral and social responsibility to clean up the mess they have made in Iraq and Afghanistan, because God is watching us. And to render any and all medical and financial assistance that America's veterans are entitled to. Whether America's military and civilian leadership decides to do so or not remains to be seen. Please remember to give me a like, a share, and a subscribe at the bottom of your screen there. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Please visit my book page on Amazon at amazon.com/author/Paul J. Bern. It's Paulbern. And you can get the text versions of these videos on Substack from my Substack account. Just go to pburn.substack.com, and while you're at it, sign up for my newsletter. It gets published twice a week. And so, I guess that's all for now. I want to thank you all for the privilege of your time. You're all very much appreciated. Thank you so much. And so, having finished this one up, I want to urge each and every one of you to be blessed in Jesus' mighty name.